Good morning, everyone. We are Group 1 and we are going to report about realism, traditional literary period. So, defining realism. It is an accurate way of portraying life, whether it be in a literary or artistic manner. The purpose was to represent everyday life as it truly was, without the misconception of fairy tale. So, how did realism begin? Realism was first introduced in the late 1800s, but really became popular in the 19th century as a steer away from Romanticism, specifically after World War I. Realism expressed different perspectives of war, often referring to social class, and represented the American lifestyle. It was indeed a realistic writing. What are the impacts of realism? Realism addressed groups as a whole, mostly middle and lower class lifestyles. Realism is culture over nature and a representation of society and its norms, religiously and politically in involving real life situations and of course the government. It also expressed the psychological impacts of war and real-life situations and other aspects of life. Naturalism was a literary movement that was born through realism. It was utilized to express social issues or lifestyles. Naturalism helped pull away from the ideas involving Romanticism and Surrealism, paving the way to realistic literature. A couple of influential authors include William Dean Howells, an American realist, and Mark Twain, an American author who adopted realism in his writing. Howell wrote novels such as My Year in a Log Cabin and addressed cultural and social issues in his writing. He encouraged readers to question the truth and believed that realism was a democratic movement. Twain's most famous novel that introduced realism was The Adventures of Tom Sawyer, which portrayed the American youth. This novel exposed realism to mainstream literature and appealed to the common people in the lower and middle classes. So realism challenges readers to look past myths, assumptions, social norms, and other expectations in order to see the world as it really is. The assumption behind this strategy was that literature had the power to change the society. By depicting life, word and all, writers could improve the world without being too preachy about it. Historically, this effort to depict the world on honest, objective terms found its roots in the invention of photography and the other proliferation of newspapers throughout the United States, whereas painting made it fairly to romanticize subjects like war. And that would be all for the introduction of realism.
The example of literary piece that we have is The Man with the Hoe by Edwin Markham. Bowed by the weight of centuries he leans upon his hoe and gazes on the ground, the emptiness of ages in his face, and on his back the burden of the world. Who made him dead to rapture and despair, a thing that grieves not and that never hopes, solid and stunned, a brother to the ox? Who loosened and let down this brutal jaw? Whose was the hand that slanted back his brow? Whose breath blew out the light within this brain? Is this the thing the Lord God made and gave to have dominion over sea and land? To trace the stars and search the heavens for power, to feel the passion of eternity? Is this the dream he dreamed who shaped the suns and marked their ways upon the ancient deep? Down all the stretch of hell to its last gulf, there is no shape more terrible than this, more tongued with censure of the world's blind greed, more filled with signs and portents for the soul, more fraught with menace to the universe. What gulfs between him and the seraphim? Slave of the wheel of labor, what to him are Plato and the swing of Pleiades? What the long reaches of the peaks of song? The rift of dawn, the reddening of the rose. Through this dread shape the suffering ages look. Time's tragedy is in the aching stoop. Through this dread shape humanity betrayed, plundered, profaned, and disinherited, cries protest to the powers that made the world, a protest that is also a prophecy. So that was the poem written by Edwin Markham, The Man with the Hoe. So who is Edwin Markham? So born on 1852 and died 1940. His original name is Charles Edward Anson Markham. So he is an American poet and lecturer and best known for his poem of social protest, The Man with the Hoe. His poetry expresses his advocacy of social reform as well as desire for the unity of humankind through spiritual faith. So this poem is published in 1899. So basically this is the subject. um, During this time, workers in the United States had few protections and rights. So that is why this poem was written by Edwin Markham to show to the world what is really happening. So his inspiration of his poem, we have there the picture of the painting from a French artist, Jean Francois Millet of 1862. So the poet Edwin Markham was inspired to write this poem after seeing The Man with the Hoe. So when I saw this painting, he was inspired to write, to share what is in his mind. Jean-Francois Millet is noted for his scenes of farmers. He can be categorized as um, part of the realism movement and has been considered a social realist. In literary realism, there are classic elements. So here in our analysis, we have two. The first one, the realistic character and the setting. So based from the poem, we have here first the first four lines. Bowed by the weight of centuries, he leans upon his hoe and gazes on the ground, the emptiness of ages in his face, and on his back the burden of the world. Years of hard work have left their laborers stooped over his hoe and staring at the ground like many generations of laborers before him. So from these lines, we can picture out, actually we can have an image what kind of person or man is being described. Okay, so is he happy, contented, or probably he is tired? Then the man carries a great weight, one that the speaker compares to the burden of the world. So it's like the man is carrying a heavy load. His face expresses nothing, even as the rest of society depends on the harvest he reaps. So it seems that his labor was not seen by many, um, and he is not being thanked for what he had done for everybody. Another line, solid and stunned, a brother to the ox. So the man in the poem is compared or has similarity with farm in with animals in the farm, being dumb and unfeeling. Through this dread shape humanity betrayed, plundered, profaned, and disinherited. So his body represents a betrayal of humanity itself. So it's like he's not given a right as a person, as a human being. He has been robbed by working all the time without rest and probably not paid exactly the amount that he that is deserved for him, defiled and denied a fair share of what he produces. The second classic element of realism here is the importance in depicting social class. So from these lines, slave of the wheel of labor, what to him are Plato and the swing of Pleiades, we can see that this man, we can imagine that this man is a slave, a laborer, okay? And because he must work constantly in order to survive, he has no time for intellectual pursuits such as philosophy and astronomy. Or in other words, he cannot study, he cannot learn, he was not given the privilege to learn, to discover the beauty in learning, in art, in music. Another one, through this dread shape the suffering ages look. Time's tragedy is in that aching stoop. So as you can see in the picture, the man is bending. The suffering of the workers throughout the ages can be seen as frightening body. So his body doesn't look healthy, right? Um, we can see that he is suffering. The tragic oppression of the working class throughout all of his history is reflected in his bending body. So, meaning this is not just about the man, but this man represents the the laborers, the workers who are being oppressed and exploited. For the type of literary realism, it's very obvious that it uses social realism, in which explores the lives of workers and poor, focusing on the working class, provides social commentary on the devastating condition of these people. So the sad reality about exploitation, about oppression, about the working class has been shown here and has been brought for, of course, the people, especially the ruling class, can um, realize that although they are laborers, but they are also human beings. And the themes of this poem, we have labor and equal rights. So again, this poem was published in 1899. That's why this was the situation that time when workers in the United States have few protections and rights. So they are fighting for their rights, for the equal rights. And right now we are blessed because we already have that equal right. So through this poem, their rights were probably voiced out. Then, for the purpose of this literary piece, we have one, not for art, but to try to change the sad reality. So, in realism, it's not more on art, but it's more on changing the current situation. Then, number two, calling for the privileged people in the society and the ruling class to treat the laborers fairly. So, I hope you've learned from our discussion on realism. Thank you for listening.